All right, let's jump right into this. Today, we're unpacking an event that honestly sounds exactly like the plot of a Hollywood thriller, but it is entirely 100% real. We're talking about how a luxury vacation out in the Mediterranean spiraled into a total nightmare. A nightmare that dragged the world's most powerful militaries into a really tense, guns-drawn standoff. This is the incredible story of the Achille Lauro hijacking.
So the big question we're trying to answer today is, how exactly did a luxury cruise ship spark a standoff between the world's most powerful militaries? Well, to really understand this, we have to start by painting a pretty intimate picture of October 3rd, 1985. The Italian cruise ship Achille Lauro sets sail for an 11-day journey. Now, among the passengers are Marilyn and Leon Klinghoffer from America, and they're celebrating Marilyn's 58th birthday. This trip was incredibly special for them. Marilyn had recently beaten colon cancer, and Leon, who was a 69-year-old businessman, had actually survived 2 strokes and was using a wheelchair. So they were finally getting a well-deserved, peaceful break.
And just think about the sheer scale of this floating city for a second. You've got 748 passengers, mostly American and British, and 320 crew members. The vibe on board was completely idyllic. The sea was perfectly calm, you've got this beautiful golden sunlight hitting the waves, kids playing on the deck, elderly passengers just relaxing and sunbathing. It was literally exactly what a luxury cruise should be. But I really want you to keep that peaceful atmosphere in mind because it creates this jarring, terrifying contrast with what's about to happen. But a ticking clock had already started. 14 hours. See, on the morning of October 7th, the ship docks in Alexandria, Egypt. 651 passengers disembark for a 14-hour bus tour to go see the pyramids of Giza, and the plan is to just rejoin the ship later in port side. But because of this day trip, suddenly only 97 passengers are left on board, including the Klinghoffers. So the ship becomes incredibly empty almost overnight, and those remaining passengers, they become highly vulnerable.
Part 1. Terror on the Mediterranean.
So while the ship is sailing toward Port Said to pick up those touring passengers, this shocking, inciting incident happens entirely by accident. A cabin warden is just walking around delivering complimentary food, and he mistakenly opens the door to a passenger cabin. And what he sees inside is terrifying. 4 men, who had bypassed the ship's basic security by actually hiding weapons in an oil tank, are sitting right there cleaning automatic weapons. Well, the men absolutely panic. Knowing their cover is completely blown, they decide to rapidly escalate the situation. By that very same afternoon, rather than risk getting caught, the hijackers just storm the dining hall. They're firing automatic weapons, sparking absolute chaos. They destroy the ship's communication system. Right after a frantic SOS call gets sent out, they take the captain at gunpoint, and they falsely claim they have 20 men on board just to spread fear. And then, they issue a hard deadline, October 8th, 3 p.m.
It's like tossing a match into a powder keg. A single, isolated incident way out in the middle of the sea instantly drags 7 different nations into a highly volatile diplomatic nightmare. Think about it. You have Italy, whose ship was hijacked; Egypt, where the ship had literally just been; the USA and Britain, who both had citizens held hostage; Israel and Syria, who were pulled into the geographical and political demands of the hijackers; and the PLO, the Palestine Liberation Organization. All of them inextricably linked in a matter of hours. And the hijackers waste absolutely zero time. They force the captain to sail the ship toward Tartus, Syria. Then they begin this really chilling process. They deliberately start segregating the American, British, and Jewish hostages from everybody else, forcing them up to the upper deck. Leon Klinghoffer, because of his wheelchair, is left down in the lower cabin, but his wife Marilyn is taken up above. And then the hijackers issue their core demand. Israel must release 50 Palestinian prisoners by 3 p.m., or they're going to start executing the hostages. Now, Israel's policy was entirely unyielding. They outright refused to release the prisoners at any cost. And so, the hijackers unfortunately made good on their terrible threat, leading to the tragic murder of 69-year-old American Leon Klinghoffer. The hijackers calculated that because of his wheelchair, he was the easiest person to isolate. They pulled him out of the stern of the ship, shot him, and threw his body and his wheelchair overboard into the Mediterranean. It's a deeply grim, heartbreaking moment that instantly elevated this entire crisis from a hijacking to an international murder.
Part 2. The Mastermind Negotiator.
While all this is happening, there's a frantic diplomatic scramble going on in the background. After Syria refuses to let them dock, the ship turns back toward Port Said, Egypt. Egypt and Italy desperately want a peaceful resolution here to save those remaining hostages, so they reach out to the PLO to help negotiate with the hijackers on board. So the PLO sends 2 men to act as peacemakers, and primarily a guy named Abu Abbas. But get this, there is a massive, almost unbelievable twist here. Abbas's public role was the negotiator, stepping in over the radio to save the day and instruct the hijackers to behave. But his private role, he was actually the head of the Palestine Liberation Front and the literal mastermind who orchestrated the exact attack he was pretending to resolve. His original plan was to use the ship to secretly infiltrate Israel, but when that cabin warden discovered the weapons early, the whole plan fell apart. So Abbas was negotiating simply to cover his own tracks.
Eventually, a deal is struck for the hijackers' safe passage. The terms were that they'd release the ship and the hostages in exchange for a flight out of Egypt. But the United States drew a very hard line, stating America's policy is that it never negotiates with terrorists. The US was absolutely furious. An American citizen had just been murdered. The US ambassador vehemently opposed the deal, but Egypt, who was really just prioritizing the hostages' safety and trying to navigate this immense regional pressure, let the hijackers off the ship to a welcoming crowd and secretly prepared to fly them out of the country.
Part 3. The Mid-Air Interception.
U.S. intelligence, working closely with Israeli intelligence, figures out that Egypt is actually hiding the hijackers and planning to sneak them out on a commercial Egypt Air Boeing 737 bound for Tunisia. And the U.S. decides right then and there, we cannot let these men escape justice. So what happens next is quite literally one of the most audacious tactical maneuvers in military history. Step 1. U.S. Navy fighters launch, including F-14 Tomcats and radar aircraft. Step 2. They approach the commercial flight path over the Mediterranean in complete and total darkness, with no lights on at all. Step 3. American pilots fly incredibly close to multiple commercial planes in the sky, literally turning on standard flashlights from inside their fighter jets to read the tail numbers in the dark. Finally, they spot it. SUAK. They found the plane. Step 4. They completely surround the commercial jet, deny it clearance to land anywhere else, and force it to divert to a military airbase in Italy.
Part 4. The Sigonella Crisis.
So the Egyptian commercial plane is forced to land at the Sigonella Air Base. Now, this base sits on Italian soil, but the US Navy operates out of it. And what happens next on that runway is the stuff of absolute geopolitical nightmares. The second those wheels touch down, the sheer scale of the standoff becomes clear. You've got 80 elite US Navy SEALs and Special Forces who immediately surround the plane to grab the hijackers. But within minutes, they are completely surrounded from behind by over 300 Italian Air Force and Carabinieri troops. So you literally have two close NATO allies heavily armed, pointing guns directly at each other on a dark runway, completely deadlocked over who actually has jurisdiction. The friction here was absolute. The US stance was super firm. We tracked them, an American citizen was murdered, we have the first right to extradite and punish them. But the Italian stance was equally firm. The crime happened on an Italian ship. Sigonella is Italian sovereign soil, so the jurisdiction is entirely Italy's. And for 5 grueling hours, nobody blinked. Finally, knowing that a literal shootout between close allies would be completely catastrophic, the US Department of Defense ordered American forces to stand down, retreat, and let Italy handle the arrests.
Part 5. Justice and Legacy.
So Italy takes the hijackers into custody. But remember Abu Abbas, the mastermind who was also on the plane? Well, he claimed diplomatic status as a quote-unquote negotiator. Supported by Egypt, and despite furious warnings from the US, the Italian government actually allowed Abu Abbas to board a commercial flight and escape to Yugoslavia. Ultimately, the 4 men who stormed the ship did face justice. The Italian court handed down heavy sentences. Yusuf al-Mulki, the man who shot Klinghoffer, received 30 years. His accomplices received 24, 16, and 15 years in prison. And as for the mastermind, Abu Abbas, well, he spent decades on the run, but his past finally caught up with him. In 2003, US Special Forces captured him during a raid in Baghdad, and he died in American custody a year later.
Now, amidst all this massive geopolitical maneuvering, we really have to remember the profound human cost here. The trauma inflicted on the Klinghoffer family was just immeasurable. But, from that trauma, Leon and Marilyn's daughters established the Leon and Marilyn Klinghoffer Memorial Foundation. Rather than just mourning, they created this enduring legacy dedicated to combating terrorism worldwide through education, politics, and legal action. They fought for accountability to make absolutely sure that a tragedy like this isn't just forgotten. Which leaves us with a final, pretty provocative question. How does a single act of terror test the fragile alliances of global politics? The Achille Lauro hijacking wasn't just a crisis isolated to a ship out at sea. It really showed us that, in an interconnected world, A single incident can instantly drag tight allies to the very brink of a shootout and expose the raw nerves of international relations. It's a stark reminder of our shared vulnerability. Take a moment to really think about that and how it applies to the global alliances we rely on so heavily today. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll catch you in the next one.